Hey everyone, welcome to the College Football Rundown. I'm Woj.
I'm Walt.
You can follow us on Twitter at WWCFB. Our website is collegefootballrundown.com. Make sure to go onto the website if you get a chance and subscribe to our email blasts. You'll get those. They'll tell you what's coming up on the episodes. They'll give you a reminder of when the episode actually is. By the way, we changed our schedule. If you're listening right now, you obviously know that. But again, Wednesdays at 8 o'clock, we'll go live. No longer on Fridays. And make sure when you go to the website as well to sound off. There's that button to sound off. Make sure you give us some questions in before Tuesday so we can get them onto the show for Wednesday. Also, when you click on our YouTube links or you're just watching our videos, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube. That'll also give you a reminder, and just keep a nice log of our episodes in your folder. So you can watch them whenever you want to. You don't have to watch them on Wednesdays, but just gives you a nice quick access to our videos and a way for us to know that people are listening and watching. So please subscribe if you can. So Kyle, a couple crazy games last week. We saw game day go to West Virginia for TCU playing the Mountaineers. Quite the defense by West Virginia, at least in the first half, or just bad play by TCU. West Virginia turned the ball over 3 times in the first half alone, and TCU was not able. By the way, TCU, the number one ranked scoring offense at 59 points per game, which is absolutely crazy, but they were unable to score off all 3 of those turnovers and were held to 7 points in the first half. It didn't stop entirely, though. That West Virginia couldn't score enough points to keep TCU at bay, and they came back in the second half. 2 touchdowns in the third quarter, and a touchdown and then a kick in the fourth had them overtake the lead 31-30, and they beat West Virginia on national television at game day. It's pretty big for the Horned Frogs. They have a big contest coming up that we'll talk about a little bit later this week against Kansas State. One of my favorite games last weekend to watch, I don't know about yours, Kyle, was Auburn Ole Miss.
It was a good game, and it was almost as good to watch as the game you just talked about, TCU West Virginia. Yeah. It was even better, though. I don't know why game day was at TCU West Virginia. Do you?
No, I don't know either. I would if my game day pick I'd be at Auburn Ole Miss. That was yeah, definitely. But nevertheless, Auburn traveled to Ole Miss, and we talked about Ole Miss last week, Bo Wallace struggling with, both himself mentally and just struggling on the road, passing. Well, he got over those this game. Back and forth game by both Auburn and Ole Miss. It was blows both ways. I still agree with my statement at the beginning of the year that Nick Marshall and Dak Prescott are 2 of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, because watching Nick Marshall that game, watching him roll, keep plays alive in the pocket, and then throwing them downfield, it's what he does the best. I think he does the best out of any quarterback in college football right now, is just keeping games alive, or keeping plays alive and scrambling and not looking for the instant run, looking for the play downfield if he has to. I think he does a really good job of that. If you're watching this game, though, one thing to key in on was wide receiver blocks. The entire game, both teams were just getting wide receiver blocks up and down the field, and it was fantastic to watch. You could make a highlight reel of wide receiver blocks from that game from both teams.
I agree completely. And then if the play that everybody's going to remember from that game kind of goes right into that, there were some great wide receiver blocks on that play where Ole Miss almost went up and took the lead. I saw at least 3 or 4.
It was a wide receiver screen on that play.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
At least 3 or 4 wide receivers making plays to help out their comrade get in the end zone.
Yeah. The play Kyle was talking about came with about 1:30 left in the game. Ole Miss was down on Auburn 35-31. They threw a wide receiver screen, and Aquel Treadwell caught it. Screens all the way down the field, broke a tackle actually, dragged a guy almost into the end zone, and while dragging him in the end zone, he got hung up, crossed the touchdown, but got flipped backwards on his back. At that point, another Auburn player came in and hit him, jarred the ball loose, looked like it killed the guy. They ruled it a touchdown to begin with, and then they came back and overruled it, and it ended up being a fumble in the end zone. Unfortunately, Treadwell broke his leg on that play, won't return for the rest of this year, which is unfortunate for the young guy, but what a game, back and forth. And like we said, wide receiver screens. You can make a highlight reel on that if you ever want to watch some really good blocking from your wideouts. Go ahead and replay that game and watch it.
Another incredible thing from that game, if you think about this, and let's think all the way ahead to the end of the season. If Ole Miss wins this game, you know it's a completely, no matter what happens, it's a completely different scenario at the end of the season. Now, they called that play a touchdown on the field. And what happened? It got reviewed by the instant replay. Now, let's go back 10 years. That would have never happened.
No.
If this were 10 years ago, and this is something I think people take for granted all the time is instant replay. If this were 10 years ago, Ole Miss probably wins this game. There's a minute and a half left. Arguably, maybe Auburn does go down and score. It'd be tough at Ole Miss. But I'm going to just go ahead and say that Ole Miss would have won that game had it been 10 years ago. And that's something you can't take for granted.
No, it would have... Yeah, Ole Miss would have won that game. Auburn's chances at the national championship would have been gone at that point. They would have been out of the playoff selection. They would have been out of the SEC championship title race. It's a completely different scenario for the rest of the year if you think about that chain reaction there.
That's just something people take for granted. You want to remember too that I think instant replay is a great addition in college football.
Oh, I agree too. Another game, Utah traveled to Arizona State. Missed field goals were kind of the big thing here, especially in overtime. Just a couple stats on the game. We'll skip over this quick, but Arizona State had 444 yards of total offense to Utah's 241, almost doubled it. Passing wise, Arizona State 205 yards to Utah's 57. That is incredible. Travis Wilson is a good quarterback for Utah, but they just couldn't click on offense, couldn't get it done. Travis Wilson did get a record that game. He's the only quarterback right now that has thrown for 143 passes without an interception under his belt in college football, which is a good stat. But if you only can produce 57 yards in a single game, well, maybe you need to go back to the drawing board and start passing downfield. And,
take some more chances. Maybe that's what it's telling you.
Yeah, but in overtime, Utah got the ball first, went down, kicked a field goal, missed a 34-yarder. Arizona State got the ball back, went down and kicked a 36-yarder to win the game in overtime. That would be 19-16 Arizona State over Utah. So, Kyle, rankings for this week. A couple things I just wanted to go over, a couple questions I have for you as well. But who should be in or out? Who should be in or out this week? I know a big one. You brought it up to me, and that was surprising, but that was...
East Carolina?
Well, no, the Marshall, not being in.
You're talking about who should be in. And this is something that I didn't even notice last week. We went through those rankings hardcore. We looked at them. We researched a little bit before the show. I didn't even notice this, but Marshall was not in the top 25.
Maybe that was the playoff selection committee idea to kind of get people to forget about them.
Well, here's the thing about it. Why was the playoff selection committee invented? For things like this. For things like... That's exactly why people want to see these playoffs.
I thought they would be in the mix. Like, not obviously top 4, but they'd be somewhere in top 10. They're undefeated. They're undefeated, probably going to stay undefeated, and they're probably going to win their conference championship. They're going to be in there somewhere. I would have to imagine that they're in there this week. And then we had East Carolina, who ended up losing to Temple.
Yeah, Temple beat them 20-10, and that was not good for East Carolina. They were one of the teams that were kind of struggling to stay in. Obviously, they lost to South Carolina before this year, and a couple good wins, one against Virginia Tech, a couple other good wins. But yeah, they lost. Now they're out of it. They have no more chance to get in the top 25 anyway. No,
yeah, I agree. Too bad for them. They were a pretty decent team. They had their they had their run, and now it's over. So
it's over. They couldn't be that Cinderella story, unfortunately, for college football. But that's okay. They'll come back strong next year, I think so.
Yeah. Auburn proved anything to you over the weekend with that Ole Miss game?
They did. They proved to me that they can beat Ole Miss, and that's about all they proved to me. I mean,
they can beat the number one defense in the nation.
The number one defense in the nation. Who did they play? Boise State, Vanderbilt, L.A. Lafayette, Memphis. These are the first 4 teams that Ole Miss played.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, again, the consistent problem with the SEC. They haven't played anybody other than themselves. So, yes, Auburn did prove something to me. They proved that they can beat Ole Miss. But what does that mean? I don't know. I don't know if you know, but I sure as hell don't.
Yeah, I mean, I still think Auburn's a decent team. I like Nick Marshall a lot. I think they can win tight games no matter what the competition they're playing against. I don't care if they're an underdog or what. They can go into a game and win it against anybody in the nation, in my opinion, right now, no matter what.
Well, this week they're playing Texas A&M. Now they go in and beat Texas A&M. Does that make them great?
No.
Does it help them anyway? Or is this just a neutral game? Is there only stuff they can lose from this game?
Only stuff they can lose. I don't think it helps them at all.
Well, I think you're different than the rest of America then, because I think if Auburn goes into this game, they beat Texas A&M, all we're hearing about next week, Auburn beats another SEC team, Texas A&M.
No, I agree with you. I think that's the thing. But after Alabama beat them 54-0 a couple weeks ago, and every team before then has gone in there and slaughtered them, I think Texas A&M is they're no longer on the radar. They're no longer on the board. They just switched their quarterback up, hoping for something. So Kyle, does the Big Ten still have a chance to make it?
I think they do. I think they should. Whether they will, whether it comes down to the playoff selection committee putting them in, I don't know that, obviously, but I think they should have a good chance of making it. And this is going to surprise you as much as I've been harping on them all year. The Big 12, I think, just jumps right back in this too. I think the SEC just made themselves look bad after that loss last week with Ole Miss to Auburn. I think they had a lot more to gain if Ole Miss was to beat Auburn. But the question you asked me was about the Big 10. I think the only comparison you can make for a Big Ten game is the LSU-Wisconsin game. Wisconsin only lost by 4. Again, it was a neutral field, so-called neutral field, down south in Texas, which in my opinion is kind of an LSU home field. But they only lost by 4. If you look at Wisconsin, they're 4th in their conference, in their division in their conference. 4th. If you look at LSU, where are they at? They're 3rd in the SEC, the strongest conference there is in the nation. They're 3rd. So I just think the Big Ten is comparable to the SEC right now.
Right. I mean, to a certain extent. I mean, I'm still looking at Mississippi State and Alabama as, I shouldn't say even put Alabama in there. Mississippi State and Auburn is 2 really good contenders. I think they can go anywhere against anybody and do well. Alabama still has yet to be tested, and they're going to be tested here for the rest of the season. Essentially, they're going to be playing their Mississippi States, the Auburns, they're going to be playing everybody. But I see what you mean. It's like they don't play anybody else. How are we supposed to know? Alabama's schedule so far this year has actually been just a joke.
Well, look at the rest of the teams in the SEC. Look what they got in that, second to last game of the season or third to last game of the season. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, Vanderbilt for Mississippi State. You're looking at Samford for Auburn. I mean, they don't play anybody outside of their conference that's any good. Except LSU did play the Wisconsin game, which at the beginning of the season, which hopefully we see more of that. LSU has typically done that in the past, is where they've gone out of conference to play at least one game a year. So maybe that'll happen some more. I'm sick of the Pac-10 or Pac-12 and the Big Ten playing each other every year, and that's the only thing that ever happens. But I agree with you as far as the Pac-12. I think they're getting stronger. I think the Big Ten does have a chance to get in. But I think with the Pac-12 getting stronger, that hurts. I think the playoff selection committee has made up their mind. They're going to give probably the SEC 2 bids.
Well, that's a question I want to ask you, because before we were assuming that maybe a team from the East could get a bid, right? Or maybe the team that lost possibly to an East Division opponent could get that bid from the SEC championship game. But what just happened last week? We didn't even talk about it. Florida beat Georgia, the best team in that East bracket. So, I mean, now you're talking about SEC being even more discredited. They really only have one side to their division now.
No, that's it. I agree. There's no way, no matter who comes from that other side, even if they win that game, I still don't even think they can get in.
They can't. And
it's Missouri, Georgia. I mean, that's your 2 picks right there. If either of those teams go to the SEC title game and beat like an Alabama or Mississippi State, they don't get in, I don't think. However, I do think if Alabama, say, beats Mississippi State coming up here, goes to the SEC title game and wins, I think you could see a Mississippi State-Alabama team in the national championship.
It's possible. I think it'd be very hard unless a couple of these Big Ten teams, Ohio State, Michigan State, or Oregon, unless they lose another game. If they don't lose another game, I find it so hard to put 2 SEC teams in there right now. You asked me 3 weeks ago, definitely 3 SEC teams in there. Now I think the reason you asked if the Big Ten had a chance, now I think they do, because I think that second SEC team And before we were even actually talking about 3 SEC teams at one point, but now I think that's a little less questionable, a little more questionable, I should say. I think the Big Ten does have somewhat of a chance, but now they're competing with the Pac-12 and Big 12.
Yeah, and there's where the problem comes in. Say Michigan State goes on to beat Ohio State and they end up in the Big Ten title game. They're going to be playing an unranked team on the other side, more than likely.
Yeah.
And they're going to be, even if they win that game, say Oregon wins the Pac-12, Michigan State isn't going to get a bid over Oregon because of head-to-head probably. So, but you might two SEC teams might not make it in, like you said. It's all a speculation. I do think they do have a chance. Either way, Michigan State or Ohio State, I think, have both an equal chance of getting into the Final Four. And I only say that because Michigan, I think, gets bumped on if Oregon makes it, whereas Ohio State hasn't lost anybody in the top yet, so it wouldn't matter.
No, they haven't had a strong schedule. Ohio State needs to win out, obviously, and they need those big wins that are coming up, like Michigan State this weekend.
Yeah, Michigan State and the title game, obviously. If Michigan State does win, they don't have very many people left. I think they have Maryland, Rutgers, and then I can't remember the last game, but I mean their competition for the rest of the season isn't that entailed. They've already been teams that have been beaten by lesser schools.
But then they still have to play that Big Ten championship.
Yeah, more than likely going to be playing against either Wisconsin or Nebraska, probably in Nebraska and Iowa or Minnesota.
Iowa, yeah, we just go ahead and say it. It'll be in Iowa. So.
Big game for Iowa this coming weekend. They play Minnesota, so we'll see how it goes from there. They got a big schedule left. They got Minnesota, Nebraska, and Wisconsin left in their schedule, so we'll see what happens for them. Couple games I want to go into for this coming weekend before we go any further is that Ohio State-Michigan game. And this is the Big Ten title and playoff chance right here. You have to win this game in order to get either of those. So it's a huge game for both teams. Urban Meyer, lost last year in the Big Ten title game to Michigan State. It was kind of Connor Cook's outbringing, threw for 300 and some yards in that game, which was big for Connor Cook. And now he's done fairly well this year, almost leading the Big Ten in all brackets. So the quarterback for Michigan State isn't an issue. We have JT Barrett, or should I?
You got his name wrong, just like Urban Meyer did at the beginning of the season.
I do that on purpose, just because I know the coach got it wrong, so I thought that was his name. But he's actually done a fairly good job. The only thing that he's struggled with is on the road. Younger quarterback. You saw him lose to Virginia Tech at the beginning of the season. You saw him get a really close overtime game against Penn State. We'll see what he does against one of the best defenses in the nation in East Lansing. It's going to be an extremely tough game for him to play. Let's see if he's evolved since those other games. And if he comes out strong, I think Ohio State has a real good chance here to beat him. But if they don't, it could be an issue. The offensive line for Ohio State is all brand new and fresh, where you have a beastly defensive line by Michigan State with Calhoun and Rush dominating the ends. They've done a fairly good job of controlling run games of other teams and having an effective just pass rush off a four-man line without having to put any blitzes or any extra guys. But like I said, the times that Ohio State has lost or come close to losing, it's been that battle in the trenches, just not getting it done for them. Poor offensive lines. They played a good defensive line in Virginia Tech and a good defensive line in Penn State, both with incredible ends, all American ends, and they lost the one and almost lost the Penn State game. So I think that'll depict the game quite a bit there, how JT Barrett can play in East Lansing, and then the defensive line definitely.
I agree. I think JT Barrett is the key to this game. I mean, we're going to see if he can perform, and Ohio State in itself has had some troubles, like you said, with the bigger games. Virginia Tech, Penn State, at home, at Penn State, at night, on a whiteout night. I mean, that's not an easy game to play. They obviously go into double overtime, I believe, and they end up squeaking by with a win. But can JT Barrett go to Michigan State, like you say, and perform well? If he can, Ohio State wins this game. If he can't, we know a lot more about JT Barrett than we did before, and we know that he better improve next season if they want to have a chance.
Definitely. And a stat, at least I overlook, and I think most people do too, is Ohio State's defense. Ohio State's everybody wants to talk about Ohio State offense because it's so energetic and they score a lot of points, but their defense is actually, under Chris Ash's re-engineering of it, which is their Ohio State's D coordinator, are 15th in the nation right now, and only giving up 181 yards per game. So they're nothing to joke at, especially for a Michigan State team who is going to put you to put it on the ground. They're going to do a lot of runs, and they're going to do a lot of play actions over the top with Connor Cook. So we'll see how they can handle that. It's going to be a good game no matter what. It'll be nice for the Big Ten to get a premier game, and we'll be able to see a nice game on ABC at 7:00 on Saturday. Mm-hmm. Another game I want to talk about is the Bama LSU. You saw LSU squeak one out against Ole Miss a couple weeks ago. Can they do the same thing in Death Valley again against Alabama? Alabama's traveling to Death Valley. It's going to be tough. A couple stats I found when I was looking at this game. Bama has yet to give up a 4th down conversion. 0-8 on defense. People have gone 0-8 versus Alabama, which is impressive. Only team to have done that so far. And Bama is out of 115 third down attempts, they've converted 64 of them, which they're number one, and that's 56% of the third down conversions they've completed. So that's a crazy defensive stat and a great offensive stat just right there.
Third down conversions is a huge stat in college football.
Yeah.
I think it is in the NFL too, but in college football, it is a huge stat because that means you're doing well on first and second down generally too.
Mm-hmm. LSU's key to this game is they're going to have to run the ball a lot. They ran it 50 times in 6 of the last 9 games, and 2 of those 3 that they didn't run it over 50, they lost. And with Leonard Fournette, their freshman, who by chance picked LSU just over Alabama in the signing period this offseason, he's been doing a great job. And if they run the ball and control that clock, keep the score low, I think they have a real shot. They've only really struggled in games against mobile quarterbacks. Nick Marshall ran for 119, Dak Prescott 105, Jeff Driscoll from Florida 71. Blake Sims doesn't run the ball a lot.
Not unless he's getting chased. That's really the only reason they have him run.
He's more of a pocket quarterback. He's not going to run. He's not going to scramble. So maybe they can contain him. Maybe they can pull out another win here in Death Valley. I mean, I think it really all comes down to Blake Sims, who, I talked down on the beginning here. I talked down about him and Hunter Mason from Georgia. And I think Blake Sims has evolved a little bit more these last couple of games. Last 3 games, he's had 7 TDs, 715 yards. Completions was still low, though. He's still completing under 60%. I think he had 52, 53, and 59 the last 3 games. So I really think this all comes down to Blake Sims and him controlling the ball for the entire game and how well Bama's defense can handle that rushing offense of LSU, which I think if there's any team in the SEC that can do it the best, it would be Alabama, because they have a real physical and big front line. No matter if they're experienced or inexperienced, they're big enough, bigger than most SEC teams. So,
well, I think a lot to do with Alabama is their coach. I mean, they're going to come in this game a lot better coach than Ole Miss came in LSU. I mean, Nick Saban, the best coach. Would you not agree? He's the best coach in the nation.
I would agree.
I mean, now he's got Lane Kiffin under him, running his offense, coordinator, Lane Kiffin. I mean, this is just a well-coached team. They're going to come in LSU. Who's a better team? I think Alabama personally is, and I don't even know why we talk about LSU every week, who they're playing, because I don't want to harp on the SEC not playing anybody, but they're going to come into that game well-prepared. They're going to be the more prepared team, that much I can tell you. Whether the home field advantage helps LSU to beat them, I don't know. I doubt it, but I think Alabama's going to come home with this win.
Lane Kiffin, too, one of the few offensive coordinators that actually stays on the field.
Yeah, he does. He likes to be by the players. I think he likes to yell at them.
I think he likes to be out there to yell more than anything. You see him running up in the sidelines yelling more than you see Nick Saban. It's hilarious. He looks like the coach, for Christ's sake.
He does sometimes.
But, it's funny to watch him running up and down the sidelines going crazy. I think LSU can pull that off, but Alabama just has too many weapons, and like you said, they're too well coached. Manhattan's going to run out of tricks here, and I think Alabama ends up taking it in Death Valley. So
I agree with you on that.
All right, Kansas State TCU. We just saw TCU win that close one over Virginia Tech last week. I think Kansas State travels to TCU this week, and I had a fun time just looking at rankings at this one. And we're not going to talk about the games. I'm just going to go over rankings and let everybody think about it. Total offense, TCU's ranked number 3, Kansas State number 56. Scoring offense, TCU 2, Kansas State 15. So obviously we see a trend there. TCU's offense is fairly strong. They obviously know that they're the number. They were 59, I think, 59.5 points per game before the last game. I think they just got bumped down to number 2 in scoring offense because of the West Virginia game, but they were number 1. Total defense. So these are yards allowed. TCU's 48, Kansas State 16. Scoring defense, TCU's 40, Kansas State 12. So we see a trend there too. Kansas State a little bit better on defense than TCU. Red zone offense, and this is where these stats get incredibly awesome. I think this is a fantastic stat, and Kyle, would you agree that just red zone offenses in college football, as well as third down conversions, are just a huge thing?
They are. If you get inside the 20, which is obviously the red zone, if you get inside that 20, you got to score.
Yeah. TCU's red zone offense is ranked number 33 at 88% of the time they're in the red zone. This is the number one, before last week, the number 1 team in the nation in scoring offense. Are only ranked number 33 in red zone offense at 88%. Kansas State, number 6 with 93%. So maybe not the most efficient explosive offense, but very efficient. Red zone defense, TCU ranked 90th, giving up 86% of the time somebody's in their red zone, they get scored on. Kansas State, 11th, 71% of the time that somebody's in Kansas State's red zone, they get scored on. That's a good stat to have. Just the red zone stat there alone tells me Kansas State has the upper hand in this game. I don't care how many points TCU scores.
That's true, but I think I agree completely. Red zone's a huge thing. I think one thing that might be a little misleading about that, though, is TCU gets a lot of big plays. They score a lot of their touchdowns on big plays, so they're never actually considered being in the red zone. But from the stats that you just read, it sounds like if they do get in the red zone, they're not going to be able to score against Kansas State.
Like Kyle said, though, they do give a lot of big plays, so I understandably so. But I just thought I'd go over some stats that are just kind of fun to look at every now and then, some rankings. And it's just the whole red zone defense and offense for K-State is just very impressive. Number 6 ranked offense and the number 11th ranked defense. So, playoff selection, our favorite time of the week. Mine's not changing.
It's not.
No one's lost. I'm going to keep them in there. It'll probably change in the coming weeks, depending on how this Big Ten team goes and we'll, what happens from there. I'm going to try to take 2 SEC teams out as much as possible, but I just don't. I need the college football committee to tell me I can take 2 SEC teams out, and they're not telling me that yet.
Yeah.
So Mississippi State, Alabama, it's my 2 SEC teams. I'm going to keep Oregon, and I'm going to keep Florida State. That's my selection right there.
Well, we got 2 of the same, Mississippi State, Florida State. Obviously, I have to change mine up a bit this week because Georgia lost. I've been big on Georgia, but I'm going to keep Ohio State in there, who I had last week. Obviously, you don't have them. And then the difference being you have Oregon. I'm going to put Notre Dame in here.
Ooh, left field.
Notre Dame has a big game this weekend. They're playing Arizona State.
That's a big game. They play Arizona State's had a lot of good competition. I think it's just a good game in general to watch. It's going to be a tough game for Notre Dame, in my opinion. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Remember the new time, 8 o'clock on Wednesdays. You can watch us anytime. Please sub to our channel if you can, please. Either you can sub to our channel, and then also on our website, which is collegefootballrundown.com, you can sub for our email blast, which will give you a link to everything, give you a breakdown of what's to come up in this coming week. You can follow us on Twitter at WWCFB. We'll tweet during the games on the weekends and give you some information and insight from what we're sitting, probably drinking beer and watching the games. But thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Woj.
I'm Walt.
And we're out.